Thank you, Senator. Thank you all very much. Wow. That's a big group of folks. You know, it's funny. I stopped at Walgreens down at Space Center Boulevard on the way here, and I walked in, and there was a UPS guy walking right out the door. He said, "Dan, I haven't seen you since Channel 11." And I'm thinking, I left there in 1984. How many of you remember? It's hard to see the lights. How many of you were? Now, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. You were all either children or teenagers. 1984. It's been quite a ride, and God has blessed me greatly to have this incredible position in Texas. We'll talk about that a little bit. I tell my wife all the time, whenever we're doing events and we're leaving here, and Ivanka Trump is at the Space Center today, so I'm getting ready to go over there after this and join her, and Senator Cruz, who I think is flying in with her from Washington, because he's going back and forth because of the Kavanaugh vote in the Supreme Court whenever that happens, or the hearings. And I tell my wife all the time, when we moved here in 1979, in the Love You Blue days. Those great days, fun days, boomtown for Houston, Gillies and everything else that went with those times. And I said, you know, Jan, we've been married now 43 years. In your wildest dreams, did you ever think one day I'd be the lieutenant governor of Texas? Wasn't even on our bucket list. I wasn't thinking about running for office. She said, honey, I don't want to burst your bubble. You've never been in any of my wildest dreams in our entire marriage. So I don't know what that means. I kind of have a hint. They're making a movie with Sandra Bullock starring as Wendy Davis. Remember Wendy Davis in The Filibuster? So they're making a movie about that with Sandra Bullock playing her. And so I was sent the script, not because they wanted my consultation. They write whatever they want to write, theatrical license. And so they had to have a villain in the movie debating her on the floor. Guess who the villain is? Me. And because we did have a pretty spirited debate for, you know, that filibuster went 13 hours. I didn't debate her the entire time, but a lot of that time. And so I said to Jan, I said, so Sandra Bullock is playing Wendy Davis. I'm thinking George Clooney, Brad Pitt. She said, I'm thinking more like Dan Aykroyd. I said, have you seen him lately? She said, that's what I mean. I'm thinking like Dan Aykroyd. So, but Houston has been so wonderful to me and my family, and Texas, and so we are blessed. You know, we are, without question, the envy of the world. When I go to lieutenant governors' conferences, everyone would like to be the lieutenant governor of Texas. In fact, most people want to live in Texas. That's why 1,000 people a day are still moving here. Yeah, you applaud that. When George Bush became president in 2000, there were 18 million of us, and today there are 28 million of us. We've added 10 million people since 2000. And the forecast is that we will add 15 million more by 2040. That's only 22 years from now. So from 2000 to 2040, we will have grown from 18 million to over 42 million. And why are they coming here? Well, there are a lot of reasons. First of all, the number one issue is the economy, for their own business or for their own life. We are looking for good people to work hard, and they're showing up. And I'll talk about that more in a moment too, because we have a need for so many trained workers in so many fields in this state. They're coming here because jobs are here. We're the number one job creator in the country in the last 5 to 6 years, creating over 500,000 jobs in Texas. Just since Trump was elected in January 17, Dallas has added more jobs than any other city in the country, in the Dallas, you know, Frisco, Plano, that area. They've added 150,000 jobs in less than 2 years. It's amazing. And companies are moving here. You know, we're number 2 for Fortune 500 companies in the country. CEO magazine, for I think now 6 years in a row, has said Texas is the number 1 place to come to. And they come here for many reasons. Because of tort reform that was passed in 2003, long before I was in the legislature. But that ended frivolous lawsuits against business and industry and doctors. Very important. That was kind of the catalyst. Rick Perry, who I spoke to this morning, he was the guy who became the great, remember, recruiter for Texas. I mean, he was running radio ads in other states, bring your business here. We have low regulations, sensible, safe regulations, but not like other states. You know, I have business people tell me all the time, Dan, you know, we operate in California and Texas or some other state. So it will take us 3 years in these other liberal states just to get the permits to begin the process of our, whatever business they're in, of our buildings. And we can get the whole thing done in less than 12 months in Texas. So the cost of doing business is much less. Property taxes, which I'll talk about in a moment, is our #1 hurdle that we have to overcome because they're too high for homeowners and businesses without question. But we're the place where businesses want to come to, and we're the place where workers want to come to. There are more companies on the New York Stock Exchange from Houston than any other city in the country. There are more companies on the New York Stock Exchange than any other state in the country. And then overall, there's something about Texas that other people want to be a part of. How many of you have moved here from other places like I did? There's just, and I won't have you shout out the states you're from, but I'm from Maryland. There's really no panache or excitement about, hey, I'm from Maryland. You know? I mean, any other of the 49 states, when you travel around the world, you say, you know, where you're from, usually people say, oh, I'm an American. You know, I'm from America. Here, when people ask you, where are you from? I'm from Texas. I'm a Texan. I'm a Texan. Proud Americans, but we're Texans. And I like to say that despite the fact we've added 10 million people in the last 18 years, as I said, that no one has actually moved here. And what I mean by that is, yes, they came here, but they arrived here and Texas moved into them. And as soon as they get here, you know it, they go out and get cowboy boots. They learn it's rodeo, not rodeo. They discover barbecue is a 3-day-a-week meal. There's just something about Texas. And over this last year and a half, and Larry alluded to how hard and he works and all the senators work, and particularly this past year, and he did great work helping his folks and businesses out in the storm. But this last year and a half for Governor Abbott and I, we make a great team. We're great partners. It's been a long year and a half. We had a session in 17, followed by a special session, and as soon as the special session was over, the hurricane hit. And when the hurricane was subsiding, which was the largest disaster and still to this day in American history, natural disaster, and then we had the largest church shooting in the history of our state and one of the largest in the history of the country. And then we were in campaign mode. It was a primary season. We did very little in the fall. We really didn't start working until about 6 weeks before the March primary because we were focused on those other issues. And then we've had the church shooting in Santa Fe. And tomorrow I'll be in Fort Worth at a funeral of one of our brave police officers who was killed in the line of duty several days ago because the governor and I, either together or singularly, try to be at every one of those funerals that we can be. We've lost close to 20 officers in the last, I say officers, troopers, sheriff's deputies, whatever department they're in, but law enforcement just in the last 2 years on top of that. So I've seen the worst of times for people in this state. I've seen people during the storm, and I'm sure people in here have your own story and your own losses. We lost almost 100 people in the storm, but people lost everything they owned. I remember talking to a 90-some-year-old man who came up to me at one of the church meetings in those days and said, Dan, my whole life is on the curb. I'm too old to rebuild. I need some help. And we're not fully back, and there's a lot to do, but it's a testament to the people of this state for the rebuild that has happened. It was a catastrophe that we all can now emphasize with the people in North Carolina. We know what they're going through. And so I've never been more proud. So it's been the worst of times, but the best of times. The best of times when we were one Texas. The best of times at the church shooting when people came together for that community. There was such a tragedy. The best of times and the worst of times, and so inspiring at Santa Fe how the community and these families came together. So I've seen the worst of times, and I've seen the best of people. You know, we have an election coming up in November, and you know, I want every Republican to win. I feel like our conservative values and our philosophy is the right path for Texas, and I think we've proven that. We surely don't want to be California. But when we're in those situations, when we're in that foxhole as Texans in a crisis, there are no Democrats or Republicans, there are no conservatives or moderates or liberals. No one on those rooftops cared who was in the boat, and no one in the boat cared who was on the rooftop. It was a fellow Texan. And I saw it. Larry Taylor and I went and mucked out a house down in Hitchcock. And I don't know who all those people were there that day. We were pulling out the kitchen and pulling out the floor. I knew some of them, but they just showed up. That homeowner didn't care. You know, the church community, by the way, golly day, the church community, all denominations did an incredible job during that. I don't know where we would have been without them. And the president has been a strong friend to us in that. We got a 90-10 match, which was higher than we've ever gotten before. We're getting paid pretty quickly. I went around some of those 53 counties that still erode hundreds of millions of dollars from past storms and past administrations. So we've had help from the federal, the state, the local. Law enforcement, first responders have been outstanding. But it's just the everyday Texan. So it's been quite a year on so many levels. Your industry in the port is important to me. It's important to our economy. I won't give you a lot of facts because all of you probably heard them from another speaker or know them. But we have a $1.6 trillion economy. If we were a country, we are bigger than Russia. They can have Putin, I'll take Abbott, okay? It all works out. Bigger than Russia. So if we were a country, 10th largest in the world. Of that 1.6 trillion economy, the ports along our coastline are responsible for 23% of that economy. So we are an oil and gas state without question, which also, of course, impacts our ports and makes us #1 exporter in so many areas. And now we're exporting more oil than we're importing, which is great for our state. But the ports, in essence, are responsible for 1 out of every $4 that we create in that GDP that makes us the 10th largest economy in the world. And this area, the Port of Houston and the ports in this area are responsible for 16% of that 16% overall. So of the 23%, about 65% of overall port economy. So when I became lieutenant governor in 2015, you know, as a senator, I was senator for 8 years, and you're focused on your issues. As Larry said, I was chair of education, which is public education is so important to me. We have to have the workforce, and I'll come back to that in a moment, for these jobs in the future. But I had not, if you're not on a committee that focuses on different things, it's not your area of expertise. So while I knew the port was important, I'd come down and taken the port tour with the various folks and learned as much as I could. It wasn't until I became lieutenant governor that a person came up to me, a guy named Michael Plank. He's an Aggie. Any Aggies out here? All right. I feel sorry for Aggies. People are always making jokes, you know? I don't make jokes about Aggies. My daughter-in-law went to A&M. My daughter got her graduate degree from A&M after her undergrad at Baylor. But I was on a cruise ship out of Galveston. A lot of Texans on board. And there was a ventriloquist one night. And he just kept telling one Aggie joke after another, after another, after another. And I thought, you know, this is a little much, you know? And finally a guy stood up in the back and said, "Hey, pal, I spent good money to come on this cruise ship. I'm a graduate of Texas A&M, and I don't need all these Aggie jokes." And about that point, the ventriloquist got very flush in the face, and he stood up and he said, "Sir, let me apologize." He said, "I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to that little guy sitting on your lap." Come on, you help me with that. It's a port joke. You know, that's the best I could do. But Michael Plank, who's a great Aggie, said to me, he said, "Dan, you know," and he's involved in the ports, he said, "We need the state to focus more on the ports." And of course, I was aware of the Panama Canal expanding and the dredging we have to do and the turning basins and all those things, and that's a lot of federal dollars. But he said, you know, the state can help. Up until 2015, my first session as lieutenant governor, we had never, ever taken money out of transportation and focused it on ports. Because the view was that the ports take care of themselves, inside the fence, inside the gate, whatever you want to call it, that you're all self-sufficient, and then the federal government takes care of the rest. So for the first time ever, I knew that as much as you do with inside the fence and the feds do, if you can't move the goods outside the fence and get them to where they need to be and get them to the ports, then that limits your growth opportunities, and that limits our economy. So we took $20 million, and we had a lot of opposition because there's somebody that wants a road somewhere that won that $20 million. But we took the $20 million, and we said we're going to allocate this simply for ports, for transportation to help them. Last session, we doubled that to $40 million. And we passed Senate Bill 28, which was to add people from the Port of Houston and other ports to an advisory board that is under TxDOT. And the reason that's important, and I get to appoint one person, I appointed Michael Plank to be the representative from here, and the speaker gets one appointment. The reason is we want to have port folks who are on this commission with TxDOT so that TxDOT does not leave out the ports when we talk about transportation. And it's really important for our growth. And I also formed a committee with Senator Brandon Creighton, who represents the Beaumont and Montgomery County and that area. We formed a port advisory board, so I have members, some in this room, on my port advisory committee to advise us on legislation, how we can help grow our ports from what we can do as a state. So it's real. It's a real emphasis of my time as lieutenant governor and hopefully 4 more years, but it's a real issue for the entire legislature. We put you all kind of on the map that the state can do their part and spend money to help the ports grow. About education, the most important thing in a child's life is their parent and their teacher. Today we spend $60 billion a year on education in Texas. We have 5.2 million students in public schools, about 200,000 in public charters, about 250,000 in private school, and about 300,000 homeschooled. About 6 million kids in our school system, but about 5.2 in our traditional public schools. That's more kids in school than about half the states have people. We have 350,000 teachers. We have 9,000 campuses. We have 1,200 school districts. Interesting, we're still a small state in many ways. Because of those 1,200 school districts, 799 have less than 2,000 students. You know, that's not even a good-sized high school in much of this area. So we have a lot of small school districts, but then we have the big school districts in our big major areas. I believe, and I talked about it last session, didn't happen. We're going to put it on the front burner this time. We need to pay our teachers more so we can attract the best people and retain the best people that we have. Now, let me tell you something. And I'm going to give you a quick, this is a smart group, you'll pick up the numbers. I want you to look at my Aggie clock up here on the screen. I could do a PowerPoint, but you'd forget it. Once you imagine this, you won't forget it. So look at this big clock up here. This is our budget. We spend our budget last year was $110 billion. $110 billion in round cowboy math. From 12 to 7 is what we spend on education of state dollars. We spend about 52 to 53% of all the money we budget for education. And of that, about 38% goes to K through 12, 14% to higher ed. So from midnight to 7 is education funding from the state. From 7 to 10, you can see that clearly, it says healthcare. 7 to 10, healthcare. That's what we spend in the state, and like all of you, our healthcare costs are skyrocketing, not only for retired teachers, but our state employees, our state troopers, just like your own families or your own businesses. It used to be about 10% of the budget 20 years ago or so. It's 31% and growing. So education, midnight to about 7, healthcare 7 to 10, and from 10 to 11, we spend 11% on public safety. 94% of our budget, 3 items: education, healthcare, and public safety. The other, from 11 to 12, is what we have for everything else. So, and transportation sits outside of that, if you're wondering. There's a special fund of transportation. So what happens if the hands go past midnight? If the hands go past midnight, it means we're spending more than we have. And so it's a balancing act, just like in your own business or your own personal life, of making sure what you have, you focus on your priorities, you spend your money wisely, and you don't break your budget. If we go past midnight, that means we either have to cut back dramatically or we have to raise taxes. One of the great things about taxes, we don't have an income tax and we don't want one, right? No income tax. No one wants to raise a sales tax. And we want to reduce and must reduce property taxes. So we can live within those hands on the clock, but it's our responsibility to spend every dollar that you send us. It's your money, not ours. And most of that money that we spend, $110 million, comes from sales taxes. We don't collect state property tax, no income tax. Our money comes from sales taxes. So the more we grow our economy, the bigger our budget is to focus on those needs. But within that budget, within that $60 billion we spend on education between state, local, and federal, our teachers are only getting 32% of the money. And that includes about 20% for benefits. So out of $60 billion, teachers are getting about $18 billion. Put another $4 billion on there for benefits, about 22. So we have to prioritize our money and find ways to add money so that we can attract the best and the brightest teachers. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was education chair, this is a simple question. And lots of times, simple questions get simple answers. And when I say this to you, some of you are going to say, I never thought of that, because I had never thought of this. And I said to a gentleman, I said, why aren't we attracting as many students out of college, our best and the brightest, to go into teaching? Because today, by the way, more than half of the teachers in our schools are not coming out of college with an education degree. They're coming from the workforce, they're going into teaching, and they go and get a certification. So they're alternative certified teachers, more than half. And he said, oh, it's very simple, Mr. Chairman. He said, Mr. Chairman, back in the 60s and the 70s and really into the 80s, women had very few opportunities in the corporate sector. And so the choice for women when they went to college in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, become a nurse or become a teacher. Today, there are so many opportunities for women, which it was a long time overdue. There are so many opportunities for women to join the corporate sector that pays a lot more. It's not that they wouldn't want to be a teacher. Before, they had no choice. Now they have choices, and they're choosing other fields. So we have to make teaching a top priority for the state, and we have to make the wages attractive enough to get more of our young students. We passed a program 2 years ago. I passed it as Lieutenant Governor. We created 20,000 full scholarships for math and science teachers because today, less than 2 out of 3 science teachers have a science degree, and less than 2 out of 3 math teachers have a math degree. You got a lot of people with a history degree teaching calculus. You know, if we wonder why the scores are down, it's maybe because we don't have experts in those fields teaching. So we passed a program that says if you will agree to teach 8 years, math or science, 4 years where we send you, it may be to an inner city school that needs help or a rural school, and then 4 years wherever you want to teach, we'll pay for your entire education. So we're doing everything we can, but it's a challenge. We must be in this fight all of the time. Because the number one reason people are coming to Texas with all these companies I talked about in the beginning of the speech is because we have a really good workforce. Texans work hard, but we don't have enough. Really, applaud you. Texans work hard. But today, Hector Rivera is here with the Texas Chemical Council over there. He knows this because we had a meeting in my office, and he helped with this change. I don't know how many of you know Hector, but they represent a broad spectrum of all industries regarding ports, manufacturing, you name the industries, they're all in this umbrella organization. So we put more focus on 2013 on career tech because we were graduating students out of high school and putting them all on a pathway to a 4-year degree. And quite frankly, not every kid wanted to. Not every kid was prepared. The graduation rate from our 4-year and even our 2-year colleges was very low. And we had taken our eye off career work. My dad was a steel worker. My mom was a secretary. I'm the first kid in my family to go to college. They taught me the value of hard work. There is nothing to be ashamed of having a job that does not require a 4-year degree. These are high-paying jobs, and they're needed. And in Texas, we are now leading the country in career tech, and we're going to continue that effort. It's so important. Today, when I met with Hector's group in my office about 3 months ago, they told me we have somewhere between 1 million and 1.5 million job openings today in Texas for skilled people in so many fields. I was up with the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad the other day, and I said to their CEO, I said, anything else? And he had a few things he wanted to talk about. And I said, I have a question. I said, how do you become an engineer? That's kind of, how do you become an engineer? He said, oh, it's real simple. It doesn't need a college degree. So you need a high school diploma, come in our training for about a year, serve a 6-month apprentice, and in about 2 years, you're the engineer of a train making about $100,000 a year. There are good jobs, and so we have to really focus on that, and Texas is trying to lead the way. And if we do that, we'll continue to grow our economy. The last issue I want to talk about is, which I think is relevant today, is property taxes. We've been trying to solve that problem for a long time. Long before I was in office, when I was on my talk station years and years ago, I talked about how property taxes were forcing people out of their homes because of the 10% appraisal cap. Today, your property taxes are based on evaluation that creates taxation, and you have no representation. Because under the law today, your property taxes can automatically go up between value and tax rate 8% a year. That's the law. Plus new construction. So in a county like Harris County, for example, that's a lot of new construction, it can be 10, 11% a year. Now, they can only raise your actual tax rate 10% a year, but if you get a 20% increase in 1 year, that means next year it's automatic 10%. So Paul Betancourt, Senator Betancourt from West Houston, took my Senate seat, passed a bill last session out of the Senate. Governor Abbott supported it. We were all in. That would have changed that 8% automatic to 4%. And if your local taxing entities need it more than 4%, and maybe they do, you would have a right to vote on it. So it's very important we get property taxes under control, not trying to tell local, and we got some local officials in here, not trying to cap what you have, but to live like we do at the state. At the state level, last year, our budget increased 0.2%, not 2, 0.2. On average, we grow about 3.5 or 4% a year in our budget. We cannot grow our government at any level 8, 9, and 10% a year. It's not sustainable. So property taxes, career tech, education, all those issues so important as we try to take Texas to the next level. Politics, this is really not a political speech, and we have R's and D's here, so I'll just give you a quick overview. This is going to be a very high turnout, I believe. We just had a race, for those of you who don't follow politics, in San Antonio the night where a Republican won a Texas Senate seat for the first time in 139 years, and the first Republican Hispanic ever elected to the Texas Senate, former game warden Pete Flores, and we're real proud of him. But the turnout set a record in the runoff election. There were 26,000 people who voted in July. In the regular election, it was to fill an open seat. And in the runoff, usually the runoff is half of what turns out in the election. 43,000 people voted in the special. So 43, more people voted than in the regular election. Very high on both ends. And so I think we're going to have a very interested and excited electorate. I'd be proud to have your support and your vote. I know Governor Abbott would as well. We are the leader in the nation. The world depends on a strong America. America depends on a strong Texas. And Texas depends on a strong conservative philosophy in business, in managing debt, in tax policy, and in Texas values. There are a lot of people that want to turn Texas into California. And I'm not about to let that happen. Do everything I can to stop that, because California's liberal policies have been an absolute colossal failure. In fact, if it weren't for Texas and our miracle here, that's not government, it's entrepreneurs, risk takers, and hard workers that have created. We just create the climate and the environment for it. If it weren't for Texas, this country would be in desperate economic shape. You can't count on California, you can't count on New York. The only big state that's doing well besides us is Florida, also with a conservative philosophy. So we're it, folks. The world depends on America, America depends on us. And that's a lot of pressure on us. But as I look at the future, I never thought, I said in the beginning, when I came up, it wasn't on my bucket list to run for office. I was in my 50s when I did. My kids were in college. I had the opportunity, and a seat opened up. I didn't even know the senator was retiring. And so I ran for that Senate seat on the west side of Houston Memorial and Tomball and Klein in that area. And we were very fortunate to win, and we served, and then we ran for lieutenant governor. What I do is focused on my 5 grandkids that I have, because I've had such a blessed life. You know, look, everything doesn't go well. You know, we're not up on a straight trajectory in anything in life. We have our times that we're brought to our knees, and we have to pick ourselves back up. And I've had a few of those times. But the Lord has blessed me so greatly. As Mike Pence likes to say, I'm a Christian first, conservative second, Republican third. I believe in Jesus Christ, and it gives me the peace and boldness to go about the things that I believe in. But I'm so thrilled and honored and blessed to have this job. I want my grandkids and your grandkids, those of you old enough to have any, and your children, to have the same opportunities you've had. And we're it. We're the leaders. We're the tip of the spear. And we're counting on all of you to help us lead the country. Thank you for being here. God bless you, and God bless the great state of Texas. Thank you very much.